Sasquatch, Ghost, Dogman, aliens, demons, shadow people, skinwalkers, even the Fae. Our universe is vast, dark, and wrought with infinite unexplained phenomena. We have tasked ourselves with assisting humanity in finding the keys to unlock the mysteries that abound in and around our world. What we intend to reveal behind the curtain of darkness may very well invoke those fears long tucked away in our memories. We will meet that fear head on as we strive to shine the light of understanding on these phenomena. The goal is to arm you with the power of knowledge to confront and even combat these entities. We welcome you to join us on our quest. We are Midwest Night Watchers.
Hey!
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Piercing the Veil.
Welcome, everyone.
Tonight we have Brent Thomas from Paranormal Portal, and we're going to get into discussion of some cryptids and all kinds of stuff. And who knows where this will lead. We're just going to have a casual conversation and start off with that and see where we end up. Got anything else you want to say before we bring them up?
Just welcome to the show, everyone. I hope you just sit back and enjoy it. You got any questions, feel free to ask questions, put them in all caps, and we will see them. We will try to see if Brent can answer them for you.
So we'll go ahead and bring Brent up and we'll get this show started, and hope you're all having a good night, and let's go ahead and get going. Hello.
Hello to you. How you guys doing?
Good.
How are you?
Oh, just wonderful. Thank you so much for having me on. This is great.
Oh, thanks for coming.
Yeah, of course.
So you want to tell everybody a little bit about your show and what you're all about?
Sure. My name is Brent Thomas, and my show is Paranormal Portal. As you can see, it's all decorated up, but which is both a podcast and a YouTube channel. The podcast is released every Monday of every week, and we're just starting season 5 now, so that's really exciting. Just polished up season 4, so we're diving into season 5 starting tomorrow, as a matter of fact. And also do a YouTube stream, which is on Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday nights. And the two shows are really a big departure from each other. The live shows on YouTube are much more of a variety show where we'll cover some ghosts, some cryptids, some UFO, some strange phenomena, and just try to have fun with it. We don't like to take it like, I don't know, some shows out there make it really dramatic and moody and stuff, but we just like to have fun. we're just people trying to understand the strangeness and such. So we'd like to have a good time. Whereas the podcast is more me interviewing 90% of 90, maybe 95% of all the shows are me interviewing people who've had experiences, everyday people out there that have come face to face with the impossible. And we have these incredible discussions, and it's just been a blast. So I've been at it since 2016, and it's been a hell of a journey. It's funny because, when I was younger, I was always so jealous of people. Like, I knew people back in elementary school that wanted to be something, and their whole life was geared towards being that. And I was like, wow. And I knew people that kind of figured it out along the way earlier in life. And here I was, I did a million different jobs. I've worked in many, many different fields throughout my lifetime, but I never really felt like I knew what I wanted to do until this happened, until the Paranormal Portal happened. It was like, I found it. So it's really been a dream come true for me, and it's been a lot of fun. And I've been very blessed and fortunate to meet so many incredible people out there who've been very supportive of my dream and my vision, and a lot of great friends along the way. So it's been an incredible journey.
Well, what happened to get you to start doing this?
I've always been nut about the paranormal or the, you know, the monsters. When I was really young, I was a huge fan of, and it was still before my time, but it was things that I discovered as I grew up. Things like the classic monster movies, Dracula, Frankenstein, Lon Chaney as the mummy, and the Phantom of the Opera, and all of these, Creature from the Black Lagoon. And I just thought, wow, that's really amazing. And of course, being absolutely drawn, magnetized almost into this whole idea that there's this world that we share that we're not really aware of, but seems to be pretty aware of us, and it interacts with us. And so it's to me, it was like, and I guess I'm kind of rehashing an old thought, but I used to think about the world, and I still do, but I was always like, we don't have this all figured out, but yet the established Western thought is that this is what reality is. It's like this, it's like this, it's like this. It's very sterile and categorized, and it's all labeled and put on a shelf, and you know, let's do something else. Whereas all these things are happening that just didn't fit into any of that. And I'm like, what is going on? Why is this being ignored? So I've always been fascinated by the idea of ghosts. I didn't grow up having a whole bunch of experiences or anything. I actually never had a ghost experience that I can remember until I was an adult and moved into a home that was pretty haunted. And that's where kind of that the whole ghost thing happened to me. However, when I was 14, I was, and it's a story I've told a million times, so I'm sorry, I don't mean to just be redundant like that on your show, but I was growled at by what I can only assume was a Bigfoot. And at the time I had no idea what it was, but I knew where I lived in southeastern Minnesota, the biggest thing we had was white-tailed deer. And I'm up in this state park up on a bluff climbing down with a friend, and something is suddenly behind us. And I don't know what it is. I never had the courage to turn around and look, but it was huge because the sound, the growling sound it made shook me. I mean, it shook my body. And I'm like, mental checklist. This is not a deer, a raccoon, or a fox, or a coyote. I don't know what this is. And it was terrifying. I thought I was going to die. Wow. So I never had the courage, or maybe I had the wisdom not to turn around, but I just couldn't. I thought I was going to die. And so the one thing that I was going to do is I'm not going to see it kill me. I'm not going to watch it come to kill me. So I just froze. And my friend, we both instinctively froze. It's not like some of the stories where you hear where there's like, they couldn't move. We were frozen. I couldn't move anything. It was that I didn't dare move anything because whatever was making that sound was huge. And I was 14-year-old kid. And I knew that it was well out of fight category. So the only thing left, we finally just said, we got to get the hell out of here. And we just ran. And whatever it was, didn't pursue. And so all these, these little things that happen and continued to happen throughout my life after I lived in the haunted house and then experienced much more after that. They just made me realize the world still has magic and mystery in it. And I love that. I love living in a world that isn't all labeled and categorized and scientifically, divided and conquered. I love the idea that there's still things to discover. There's still incredible things going on all around us that people are experiencing every day that is somehow just ignored by the established minds of our worlds. And so I just, that to me was the reason that I was driven into it. I never had the idea of doing a show until I worked at a job where I was also, there was a contractor that worked there that I came to know and befriend. His name is Chris Gio, and he had Truth Frequency Radio as well on the side. And I was like, Chris, I want to do the show. And it was funny because remember I was saying I didn't know what I wanted to do. But as soon as I had the idea I wanted to do the show, it just was like downloaded into my head, for lack of a better term. It's like and the name came right out. I wanted it to be called The Paranormal Portal. I wanted it to be this and this and this. And I want to, have, and it was like, where the hell did that come from? But it was like, it was just waiting for me to pick it out of the ethers or whatever. So it just became, he's like, yeah, let's do it. And so that's how it started.
Wow.
That's cool.
Yeah. Thanks. I guess it feels good to, of course, as a functioning member of society, I've obviously been dedicated to many things, my family, my wife, my child, my kids, that kind of stuff. but it's nice to be able to dedicate myself professionally to something that equally I believe in, you know. I mean, it's a different kind of belief, but still, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I grew up listening to Art Bell, and obviously, you know, as a kid, I also watched all the sci-fi movies, the monster movies, all that stuff. And, you know, I'm sitting there, you know, growing up in the church with my parents and my brothers and sisters, and I'm sitting there, you know, seeing all this supernatural stuff that's happening in the Bible, even though they don't want to acknowledge it being supernatural. They just kind of keep it in their own little bubble right there in the church. They don't really discuss anything on the outside, you know.
Sure.
So I'm sitting there thinking, all right, you know, Jesus walked through walls, he raised somebody from the dead. It kind of sounds like a zombie to me, you know, raising somebody from the dead. Not that that's what Jesus did. He did not create the zombie, but you know, I'm putting a comparison between the two, you know. So that's kind of how me and Jane talk, you know, all the time about the spirituality in the Bible and all the extra stuff. It's like, how do you not believe in paranormal and cryptids if you believe this supernatural going on in the Bible?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great point. You know, if you can acknowledge that those things did happen in the world, then why couldn't they still be happening, or things that are equally as impossible or equally unlikely, I should say. I don't know. I mean, there's certainly the case for divine miracles and them being directed by the divine intelligence, but
right.
there's still these other parts of our world that are obviously happening, because when people see ghosts, when they see Bigfoot, when they're confronted by a dog man, when they see a UFO and potentially abducted by them, it's life-changing. I mean, it's absolutely a transformative experience, and usually not a real positive one, at least initially, until people learn how to process that. But, you know, I mean, you know, for me, I carried that fear for years and years afterwards. You know, I used to go up into the woods all the time, but after that growling, I was pretty good just by the house. You know, I lost my sense of adventure for a while. I did eventually go back up in there after, you know, a year or two or whatever, but it was still, you know, it was weird. Something happened and there was nowhere to turn with it, you know. And this is, God, back in maybe 80, 84, 83, somewhere in there. I don't know, when I was 14. I'm not good with math, but that's why I do a podcast.
So did you ever hear any stories or myths or lores of anything being out in the woods in your area? Or did you have anybody to talk with that about? Or
you know, I certainly, the one saving grace was that I wasn't alone when it happened, because I think then I would have thought, God, is that even real? Did that even really happen? You know how you question your sanity. So it was good that I wasn't alone when it happened. But no, I mean, there was no, as far as I knew, Bigfoot was a thing. And this is before Bigfoot became the household word that it is now. This is, you know, again, in the early 80s, and people just acknowledged maybe there was something, but it's in the Pacific Northwest, and Leonard Nimoy told us all about it on In Search Of, and that was the stake of it. So I didn't have a concept for what it could be, and I'd never heard of a dogman or anything like that at that age. So I was stuck with this idea that there was something big. It was bigger than a bear, you know, and this is southeastern Minnesota with no bears. There's bears in the northern part of the state, especially back then. There may be black bears that have worked their way down again now as the populations have climbed, but generally speaking, we just had deer. That was the biggest animal in the woods. So I just didn't have anything to do with it. Now, the only legend that I eventually heard about where I grew up, and I didn't hear it until I was much older, probably, I don't know, in my late 20s, was this thing called Pepe, which is a lake monster. I lived right on the shores of the Mississippi River, in the widest point between Red Wing, Minnesota, and La Crosse, Wisconsin. It's kind of the whole stretch there, but they call it Lake Pepin because it's the widest point of the Mississippi River. So it's not really a lake in the traditional sense where you have a tributary and then you have an outflow. It was all one big flow, but it just widened out in that big valley there. But there was a First Nations legend of this lake monster called Pepe, and I think they called it I don't know what the traditional name for it was, but I think it was like the tipper of canoes is what it translated to. And so they had this legend. But I grew up on those shores, never saw anything out there on that water that I would have said, God, is that a lake monster? I mean, you'd see logs, and certainly I can actually empathize quite a bit with people saying, well, a lot of that Loch Ness stuff is just logs, because they do, when a log is in water, they do get kind of buoyant. And the root balls, the way those root balls on trees work is sometimes they can look like a serpentine head poking up. And so you could have this happening now. And this is, of course, wood that's been in the water a long time, so it still has air in it, so it has a slight buoyancy enough to make it, emerge to the surface and then down. So I'd seen things like that my whole life, and we'd call them deadheads. Watch out for the deadheads. If you're out fishing, gotta watch out for them, because they'll take out your lower unit on your outboard motor. I mean, in a hurry. So, but I'd never seen anything, but allegedly the search goes on, at least in some circles. It's a very small pursuit for it, but it was also kind of grabbed onto by I think it was the mayor and hotel owner of Lake City, Minnesota, which is just south of Red Wing. And he put out I think $100,000 bounty on if anybody can prove the existence of Pepe, which of course brought in lots of traffic to his hotels for a while.
Yeah.
So I'm sure his interest was real sincere.
Any recent stories of the sighting, or did it kind of fizzle out?
It's just, I grew up there and I'd never heard of it until I was well into my adult life. So I'd never heard of it. And then it just kind of popped up again where somebody swears they saw it. And it's actually a friend of the family. And maybe they did, maybe though. But the hard part is for me with a case like that. So you have Loch Ness, which is an incredibly deep lake, and has aquifers going, hundreds of feet into the ground after the bottom of the lake, and that may connect other bodies of water and stuff. And then you have Lake Champlain and any other numbers, even the lake by where I live now. I'm in the north part of Sandpoint near a lake called Lake Pend Oreille. And all of these lakes are very deep, and they are apparently home to lake monsters. But Lake Pepin, where I grew up, is part of the Mississippi River, and it's not deep. In fact, it's so silty and mucky that they have to come down and dredge the channel every year or every few years, just to make sure that the barge traffic doesn't get hung up on some Mississippi mud. So I don't know where it would be if it's in there.
We live on the Illinois River, and there's been recent reports. So I haven't specifically heard anybody tell me this, but I've seen reports and other people have talked about being some kind of serpent or monster on Illinois, where people will be out boating and they'll see something, similar to the Loch Ness or whatever, but they don't, there's no pictures or anything, or not as much attention as Loch Ness, obviously, but
sure. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
we were
So
watching that show on the Mississippi River and the old legends of the creatures, and they ended up being.
I'm sorry, you're breaking up.
Gar?
oh, you said we're breaking up.
We are breaking up. How about now?
Okay, now you're back. Okay.
Okay. What was that creature in the Mississippi on that show? Do you remember?
No, I don't remember. Yeah, but just like you were saying, I think all bodies of water probably have some kind of legend, whether it's sprites or I say sea monsters, but they're not really seas because they're in the lakes and the rivers.
Sure. Yeah. No, I agree completely. And actually, case in point, another story from my youth, and I was actually really proud of this because I thought, God, that's really cool. So growing up near Red Wing, Minnesota, there was an old bridge that was eventually replaced by a modern, bridge going over the Mississippi River to connect to Wisconsin. And in the legendary story was that as the Army Corps of Engineer had divers come down to decide where the footings were going to go for this Eisenhower Bridge, they were in the deep water and allegedly came up terrified, absolutely beside themselves, because they swear they would never go in the water again there because there were fish down there that were as big as sharks. Now, I was really proud of them. It's like, wow, yeah, I think there's some lunkers down there. And I heard that and took pride in it. And it wasn't until I was in my, late 30s, and was traveling around doing marketing for a company, and we were doing expos and stuff, that we would end up in different locations around the nation. And I started to hear some of the local legends, which included when those divers went down to set the footings for that bridge, they saw fish down there as big as sharks and swore they'd never go back. And it came to me as like, oh my God. So maybe there is a root story that somehow got transposed to all kinds of different locations. Like maybe somebody moved from someplace and told the story, and it's the old telephone thing, right? Where suddenly, instead of it being out east, it was actually here in the Midwest, or it's out west, in the Western states that this happened. And so I think a lot of these legends are just transplanted by people. And I'm not saying that every place doesn't have incredible mystery and incredible, things going on, but I think a lot of some of the stories like that, they just kind of migrate with the people that move around, Yeah,
because you had the construction workers, that were working on all the dams, and after they got built all these years, there's those great big catfish, and they say they're as big as cars down there.
Yeah, I've heard that one too, and that one, there's a dam just north of Red Wing, the same kind of thing. So it's just like wherever these things happened. I mean, well, maybe it's impossible to figure out where the root story was, if there is a root story, but I think that some of this stuff just gets transposed. It's like every hotel has the jilted bride who was abandoned at the altar and decides to go and end her existence that night in the hotel. And so, of course, she's now a ghost that haunts there. Or the child in the hotel who somehow was playing with a ball and fell down the stairs and died. And so now there's child spirits. And every hotel has them. Now, I mean, is that possible? And I'm not meaning to laugh like it's humorous, but is it really possible that every hotel had the same experience with a woman being left at the altar and ending her existence and then continuing to haunt the place? No. But I'll tell you what, one thing that has occurred to me is that I think we probably in some way have the ability to create phenomena ourselves, because if we believe something is real, does that somehow manifest it into a phenomena? Are we creating some of these experiences ourselves? And it's not to take away from the fact that there is incredible things going on that are, out and beyond of our experience. But I think some of it really does seem to demonstrate that we might be creating phenomena ourselves. And if you don't mind, I can tell you a really cool story. This one blew me away. It's one I've shared on other shows before, and it's one that I stumbled on in my own show. And I have no idea the veracity or truth of the story, but if this is true, and I always say on my show, it's like, look, I can't guarantee everything we cover here is true, but if only 1% of what we cover is true, that's absolutely amazing. Something still really incredible is going on, even though it may be well over that, or maybe even most of it is true. But if only 1% of the thousands of stories and things that I've shared on my show are true, that's incredible. But in this one instance, so the story was, as I covered it on my show, and I'm going to be paraphrasing this, so I'm sorry if I'm brutalizing it, but it really opened my eyes to like, whoa, is that possible? That's really cool. So the case was a young couple had become married, and the wife had become pregnant. He was an active service member, so they had bought a home together, and they've bought their dream home. Well, then it turns out that he got deployed and had to go over to Iraq, Afghanistan, whatever, over in the Middle East. And so she was kind of left on her own, very pregnant, but trying to put this home together while he, of course, was overseas. And she went about her life doing the best she could. And the pregnancy, of course, proceeded. But then came the day when she had visitors. And of course, it was the Corps or the military people letting her know that her husband didn't make it. He had passed away overseas, which is, oh my God, it still gives me chills just to say that, just the horrible nature of that. So here she was alone in this dream house they'd built or had gotten, and was building the dream that would never be. And so she was absolutely devastated and very pregnant. So she was racked with grief, but being very pregnant, she was really uncomfortable. So she said, according to the story, she said that she would go to the kitchen sink and let her belly rest there while she stood and just cried and bawled and tried to work through this horrible situation that she was suddenly in. And that was kind of her way of coping and dealing. And so eventually, over a period of whatever time, she had the baby and decided, look, this is way too much house for me and one baby, and I can't do it alone. So she decided to sell the house. And so she did. She listed the house, and it was eventually sold. But she was really good friends with the neighbors and stuff as she had formed this community around her. But she ended up moving away, and but stayed in touch with the neighbor friends. And so one day she went back and she's decided to stop in for a visit. And so she did. And this is maybe a year later, and stopped in to see those people. And she said, they came up in conversation. Well, how's things going with them at the house, the new owners? They said, wow, it's really weird because they said they love the house, but they keep having this terrifying experience of seeing this apparition leaning against the sink, crying, wailing. And it was like, my God, this woman was still alive. But somehow the release of all of that pain had created this imprint that was now happening. Because I always figured, well, residual, because it's residual. I mean, they said that it would just appear, and they'd hear it crying and look, and there'd be this wispy apparition of a woman crying, and then it would be gone. But she was very much alive. And I always thought, well, to have that kind of an imprint, it was some kind of, separation, or, usually as a result of death. So are we, is it possible that in the course of our lives, we're creating some of that stuff as we go through our hard times? Are we creating some of the, incessant footsteps that go up and down the hallway? Are we, doing things like that somehow just because we are energetic beings ourselves? So I think that's very interesting. It really blew me away.
Right. And before you started telling the story, you were talking about us manifesting this stuff ourselves. And I was thinking, this whole nation was brought here by immigrants from the old country, if you want to call it the UK or whatever. So I'm just wondering if they brought their folklore with, and everybody talked about it. So some of this stuff may have manifested by all that.
Sure.
When we really didn't have that to start with, maybe necessarily. I mean, we could have had some stuff, but not everything. And here recently, they're talking about how Thin Man or Hat Man, Slender Man, I'm sorry, has been manifested, where that started online. Now we're focusing on it so much. Maybe some kind of demon entity or something is actually making that true to life for us now that we've concentrated on it so much.
And and I can draw a religious parallel to that to a degree. And this might be a loose representation and may not fit exactly right, but I know, having been born, raised Christian, and I was Episcopalian and had been non-denominational, and many different expressions of that. But in many churches, there's a thing which is known as prayer by rote, where you repeat prayers from a book as part of a regular service. And I always thought, why? Doesn't seem like there's heart or passion in that, just to open a book to page whatever and say these words with me. But having done this now for a while and seeing examples of exactly what you're talking about, hearing examples of that, is that possible that is also what is being expressed in these religious services, where they repeat the prayer over? And it could be hundreds or millions of people, collectively over time, or billions of people over time, that have repeated these prayers. Does that add the energy and create more powerful impression of that prayer and the blessings of it, and and the goodwill, and maybe it does.
Well, if you look into say the rituals of witches, or whatever, Wiccan or whatever you want to go on, there's always a chant or a mantra, they, like you said, they repeat it over and over. And I don't know what that does, but and there's all those legends, if you say this guy's name 3 times, he appears, or
Sure.
I'm gonna say that it's the saying whatever you want, like I want to see so and so, and you have to say it 3 times, and it starts the investigation.
Yep. Absolutely. And you know, and someone in your chat, Aunt Edna said, kind of like saying a spell. And
Yeah.
it's exactly right. I mean, it doesn't, it's not just no one segment has the market cornered on this. I mean, it just shows an example of how collective energy can potentially create results, and good, bad, or otherwise. It depends on the people doing the prayer or the spell or the whatever. And certainly with Slenderman, you're right. I mean, I think that it becomes almost a group tulpa of sorts, where it creates its own reality, at least to a degree. And certainly fear can punctuate that as well. I think that, you know, people in scary situations are just radiating energy, you know, out, because fear is just, it's such a crippling thing. And so perhaps that creates the manifestation for some of the stuff. Now, again, explicitly, I want to say that this doesn't mean that I don't think there are real ghosts and real UFOs, real Bigfoot, real dogmen, real cryptids, but it does mean that maybe somewhere in the mix, we're a part of this in helping to manifest some of this into our existence. Maybe, you know, there's an old saying that I always grew up with, is energy follows intention. So if you send out an intention, it's magnetism, it's, mantras, it's meditation, whatever intention is, and how it's expressed for you, that it does go to where you're asking it to. It may not have, instant magical results like a genie in the bottle, but you have to trust. That's like when we say, I on my Facebook feed, please say a prayer. I have a family member going through something horrible. I don't know what that is. The person never expressed what it was, and it said, unspoken prayer request, please. Oh, I always, send my love and send a prayer for, whatever, because the more people do it. And so often it's like, oh, thank you everybody for the prayers. Everything turned out great. Well, maybe by virtue of us collectively sending our prayers, that really does have a really powerful effect. I mean, oftentimes we think of ourselves as these little dots on this huge, grand universal scale. And we think of that as insignificance. But, when so many of us come together and send our intention at something, it can be incredibly powerful. And I think that's empowering for us. Like, yeah, we really are part of something special.
I agree.
And listening to Coast, and I can't remember if it was during Art Bell's time or George Norrie, but they would get the listening audience together to concentrate and pray, or whatever your
Sure.
means is, about,
Mhm.
and they had a bad storm coming through, and they concentrated on that storm to stop it or divert it from going to a certain area. And by gosh, on the radar and through the reports, it actually curved around and went away from the area that they were concentrating on.
Oh, very cool. Yeah, I hadn't heard that, but that's very, very cool. Yeah. I think, we often sell ourselves short, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of times people don't understand or realize, what kind of power we have if we actually really concentrate and
Sure.
and put our full attention and minds and desires into this stuff.
Right. Yeah. What could we actually do if we could collectively come together in some kind of unified will towards a problem? I'm sure that we could see it through and we could see amazing results. But then again, everything takes a progression of events, I suppose. And we're maybe not ready for that, but hopefully someday we will be, and hopefully in my lifetime.
Yeah, that'd be awesome to see something like that. If you could just unlock your full potential of your brain. See, they say we only use 10%, right? So, I mean, I don't really know that. I'm just going by what they say.
Sure.
But I mean, geez, imagine what kind of abilities or stuff we'd be able to do if we was able to unlock the whole potential.
Yeah.
Right.
What can we see that we don't see?
Yes, exactly. I mean, what is actually the truth of all this? I don't know, but that's part of why I'm doing this, is because I want to understand this stuff. It's really been a personal journey of mine, because and it's probably never going to happen, but at least I just want to understand, because whatever this stuff is, it's very real, and people are really experiencing these things, and they're not supposed to be possible by every traditional wisdom, and yet they're happening all the time. So there's a lot going on here that we just don't understand.
Right. And the more you do it, the more questions you come up with.
You know, that's kind of funny that you say that. And this is something I've said on pretty much every interview I've ever done, but it is really true. Like before I started doing this, I'm like, I know about the paranormal. I can do this stuff. No problem. You have this. Yeah. You know, I read a bunch of stuff. I watched a ton of shows. I'm ready. And once you start going down the rabbit hole, and once you start hearing these many very different ideas and concepts behind it, it's like, it does exactly that. It just spider webs into so many more questions. And maybe that's part of the human experience, but my God, it's like I feel so much further away from understanding it now than I did when I was arrogantly like figuring I had it all nailed.
Yeah, I think we feel the same way. Yeah, the
Yeah.
more rabbit holes you go down, it turns into a few others, and it's a
Right.
continual battle of your mind figuring out all these rabbit holes.
Right.
But
But you
it's
know,
still fun.
so I think, you know, a lot of people like to, and this is again another canned line I've used forever, but I really do believe in this. Like a lot of people like to dismiss this paranormal stuff as like where things just kind of glitched and went weird in the reality or the matrix or whatever you want to, you know, however you want to address that. But honestly, I think this stuff is incredibly important because I think what is happening is that these are demonstrations of the true nature of our reality. Like we're so conditioned to believe we've got three dimensions and they're rock solid, their concrete reality is this and this. And you know, get a job, raise a family, live the best life you know how, good luck. And then there's all this other weird stuff. So I think in a sense, there may be an intelligence behind this. It's going, hey, wait, it's not quite what you think. You better keep digging. There's more going on here, you know, and you get these pokes like, why did my cereal bowl move? That's not supposed to happen. Is it a major event? No, but yes. Yes, because cereal bowls don't move by themselves unless they're moved. So something happened in that moment, even a cereal bowl, that defied the laws of physics as we understand them, defied thermodynamics, defied, you know, all of these different laws that we were taught were concrete. You just can't break that. And yet we're getting these demonstrations all the time. So of course, seeing your cereal bowl move is kind of terrifying. But I think if you look at the beauty of what you were shown, it now becomes a journey. If you follow it, it's like, well, what is that showing me? I just saw something incredible happen that's not supposed to be possible. What did that? How did this happen? What is the keys? And it's so frustrating that our scientific communities largely dismiss this stuff. They largely just say, oh, well, time for your meds. You know, that's their conclusion.
Mhm.
It's time for your pills or get your tinfoil hat or some other ridiculousness. And yet you saw something happen that was just small enough to be, you know, noticeable, but big enough to be earth shattering. If you follow the breadcrumbs, what happened? How did that work? What is going on here? What force is being demonstrated that we don't seem to be aware of, but is actively happening in our world? And I honestly believe that very much like what Nikola Tesla said, when we start to research the non-physical aspects of our world, we'll make more progress in a decade than we have in all of combined history. Because I think he had an understanding of some of this stuff, but just, you know, God only knows if he ever wrote it down or if it's sitting in a, you know, government archive somewhere and we'll never see it. But the point is these things happen and they're showing us something amazing. We learn, you know, through many eyewitness reports and my own experience as well. We know that it is apparently possible to, you know, move an object from, you know, 10,000 miles per hour to zero without smashing its inhabitants into pudding, because we see that in UFOs. And so how are they able to defy all these other physics that are supposed to be interacting on that mass? You know, well, that's the breadcrumb. Follow it. What is going on? What kind of things do we know? Well, we know that, you know, with UFOs, there's a radiation happening. A lot of people get radiation burns. So whatever it is got a radioactive field or something that's exciting radioactive elements around this craft. Is it, you know, what is going on? So, I mean, and I do think that secretly these things are being very researched, but we just aren't in that club.
Right.
So
So with all this UFO activity that's increasing or we're becoming more aware of because of the whistleblowers and the government's kind of acknowledging it, not really, but
There's an agenda.
so why do you think all this increase is coming? Why?
I think it's manyfold. I think that it's probably symptomatic of our new era that we're in now for a decade or so, where pretty much everybody's online. Pretty much everybody is online all the time. So suddenly an event, I saw these weird lights when I was driving. Well, hey, I got a 4K camera in my pocket that's connected to the entire global network of information. So let me put the camera out my window and show everybody. So now people have access to information like never before. And so we have the ability to put these ideas out there. And also, I think that it's okay now more than ever for people to discuss this stuff, because there was a long period of time where if you saw a UFO, you better shut up, because you're probably going to lose your job and be the idiot of the town. And God only knows what's waiting for you if you come out and say, I saw a UFO, saw a cow get sucked up. It was crazy. Well, now you're an idiot. Welcome to your little home in the corner of the community, because nobody's coming to visit. But now people can have the dialogues. And I think honestly that is symptomatic of shows like yours, shows like, Tex, like Wes, like, Tony, like, all these shows out here that are having the discussions that were always relegated to whispers in a corner with your best friend or something, so nobody would overhear you. Well, now we're having it. And, I think shows like, In Search Of, I think, Art Bell, I think there's so many champions of making this a dialogue that we can have, without ridicule, without, becoming
Right.
a social pariah, that now we can talk about it. So not only do we have access to information, we can share information like never before. I don't know that there's more of it happening or not. I mean, I know it's being reported more than ever. But I think that this stuff has been going on pretty consistently forever. It's just now people aren't risking anything to post their Instagram photo of the UFO or the Bigfoot or, whatever. They can do it because there's whole communities of people out there that are doing it and happy to have the conversation, where that didn't exist before.
Right. And we've thought that too. We've talked about that with crime and everything else. Okay, is there more crime happening, or is it more easy to report stuff? And so we're kind of wondering now about the supernatural and the paranormal and the cryptid world.
Yeah.
But everybody out there that investigates, whether it's paranormal, cryptid, or whatever, they're saying there's an increase, or at least to them it seems like there's an increase. So I mean, that's the big question. How do you know if it's being reported more, or there actually is an increase?
Well, anything with reporting always comes with a red flag for me, because obviously if anything in our current events, and I'm not getting political here, so don't worry. But what I am going to say is that right, left, middle, otherwise, no matter what you tune into, you are being driven towards some kind of an agenda. It's don't like these people because they're screwed up, like these people because they're like us. They're really pushing a monoculture of ideas, which I think is horrible. It's absolutely abhorrent, because we don't progress by sitting in our little cubicles. We progress through the interchange of ideas and the interchange of different viewpoints and stuff. So, yeah, I mean, there is more reporting about all kinds of this stuff, but again, we know that media always has a narrative, good, bad, otherwise. There's a narrative, there's an idea they're pushing, and I think that's certainly not helping. There's the whole neutral mind of the media is something of the distant past, I'm afraid, and that breaks my heart.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So talking about other stuff going on, what other cryptids or paranormal stuff that you like to investigate? You got anything else in your area besides the lake monster or the Bigfoot that you experienced when you were 14?
Yeah, those were all in Minnesota. Those two examples were in Minnesota, but I've seen a UFO with my own eyes, and it took me until I was about in my 40s, even after a lifetime of looking. Again, this is a story I've shared so many times, but if you want to hear it, I'll tell you. But if you've already heard it, please let me know, because I don't want to just repeat myself. Do you want to hear about my experience?
Yes,
Yeah.
please.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll get into it then. You ready? Here we go. So it was about 8 years ago now, maybe 9 years ago. No. It was more than that. God, I'm so lost in time now. I guess it was probably more like 12 years ago. I was working. I was actually still in Minnesota at this time, and I was working remotely doing the marketing for the company that I was telling you about when I was traveling around and heard all those stories. But the company at that time was located in Indiana, but then they relocated up to the northern tip of Idaho, which is where I am now. Now, my whole life I've been looking. I love UFO shows on TV, and I love checking out reports and sightings and stuff online and researching long before I had a show. But try as I might, and I lived out in the rural part of the world where there's no light pollution and stuff. I would sit outside for hours when I could, looking at the stars, just trying to see something. And I was always so frustrated because I'm seeing this huge expanse of sky, and it's like, how can this stuff be happening? And I can't see anything other than shooting stars and northern lights. I mean, I never saw anything that was remotely UFO-y, and it was frustrating because I'm like, am I an idiot? Am I blind? Am I not seeing something that that everyone else is seeing? What's going on? And I don't mean everyone, but you know what I mean. There's so many reports
Right.
out there. Like, God, I've never seen anything, but I always believed. I always had an open mind. It's because, I mean, the universe is enormous. How can we be the only thing that ever figured out how to crawl out of the soup? I don't believe that. So I was working for this company, and while I was working, I had to come out here where they were relocating for meetings and contracts and stuff that we were working on with advertising and stuff. And so the owner of the company had just purchased a beautiful home. It's actually more of a cabin at the time, but he put a bunch of money into it and made a beautiful home up in the mountains here in northern Idaho. And it was in basically up a logging road full of like seasonal cabins and stuff. I think there was only one or two other residents within miles of where I was, but I was up in this mountain valley, and in the bottom of the valley was this stream, a creek, and it was a beautiful area. And so he's like, why don't you just stay up there? We're not living there yet, but it's all ready to go. That way I don't have to pay for a hotel for you while you're here. And I'm like, cool, that'd be amazing. So he took me up to the place after I got here, and he was showing me around, and he said, hey, I got these night vision binoculars too. You could check these out. It's really cool. And I'm like, oh, awesome. Because I was thinking, most of the stars in our sky, in our universe, apparently, they're more than the visible light. There's red stars, and most of them are not visible with our naked eye. We would need some kind of ability to see them. So, of course, IR light or Generation 1 night vision. And so I was like, oh, this will be cool, because at night after all the meetings and stuff, I can just go sit on outside of the cabin or the home and look up at the stars with absolutely no light pollution. It was just, so got done with the daily meetings and stuff and came back all by myself up in this mountain area all alone, nobody for miles. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, hey, it's a beautiful clear night. I'm going to go outside. There was a little bit of a moon. I don't remember how much, but it was enough. Whenever you go out in the night, even from, if you have vivid enough starlight, it's manageable. It's not like you're in pitch black, so you can see around you. But I'm like, I'm going to go out and look at the stars. So I did. I went out and turned on the night vision, and I was like, oh my God, suddenly there's millions of more stars in the sky. You can't recognize a constellation. If you ever get the opportunity, anybody listening to the sound of my voice, if only to see this, get night vision binoculars or night vision scope of some kind and go look at the night sky. You're going to be blown away. There are groupings of stars that are like geometric patterns. It's just crazy. So if you get a chance to do that, do that. So I'm out there and I'm playing. I'm like a kid. I'd never played with night vision before like this. So I'm looking around, I'm looking at the stars. I'm just having a ball. And then I pan over to the other side of the valley and look at the hill over there, seeing all the trees. And I'm like, God, I can see everything. This is really cool. And they're only 4-power magnification. So it's not like traditional binoculars where you're like way, closer.
Right.
They're only 4-power. So it's much like a lot of, shooting scopes. And so I'm looking around at it, and then I pan down the side that I'm on, and his driveway had a switchback because it was elevated from the bottom. So I was like, I'm going to look down there because it looked like a wall of blackness to me. I couldn't see anything. But let's turn on the night vision. Sure enough, I can see all the way down to the switchback. And I thought, God, this is amazing. This stuff is cool. And then I decided, well, I'm going to look above the sky to see the stars again. So I'm panning up from his area is all just these huge conifer trees. and beautiful. But I'm like, I'm gonna pan up and look at the stars again. So I got the binoculars on. I'm panning over, and I kind of just stopped, and I just started going up, and I'm going up the expanse of this ponderosa pine or a blue spruce, or I don't know trees very well, so I'm just throwing out
Okay.
names to sound cool, but they're big. And I'm panning up, and I get to the top of the tree, and I'm still panning up, starting to see the stars, and I'm about 30 feet above this tree, and there it is.
Hmm.
And I'm like, oh my God, there it is. There's a flying saucer, the traditional flying saucer, except not traditional, because where the two parts, the bottom and the top coming together, are not a point. There's a gap. And in this gap is these panels. And these panels are flashing light. I mean, that's like a marquee pattern, like a movie marquee, where the lights kind of chase. That's doing that. And I'm like, oh my God. And it was just like this wash of this epiphany, like, I knew it. I'm just having a ball because I'm like, there it is. It was just sitting there, absolutely silent, not a sound, nothing to, and I was surprised, like, why didn't I know it was there? It was really weird, but there it is. It's flashing lights. It's, got all this stuff going on. I'm like, oh my God. So about 15 seconds, I'm like, I got to see this with my own eyes. This is incredible. I lower the binoculars and I see a tree, the silhouette of the trees, and then I see the stars. There's nothing there. Oh my God, it took off. Lifted up the binoculars. It's still there. Lowered the binoculars. It's gone. I'm like this. I'm like, oh my God,
Yeah.
And then it just hit me. They can hide. They can hide. They can make it so we can't see them. They could be above your house right now, surfing your internet. Who knows? But we wouldn't be aware of it without this tool. And for some reason, I was just in the right place at the right time with the right circumstances to be able to see this. And I'm looking at them. I'm looking and I'm blown away. And I've got these ideas just flying through my head like, oh my God, this is incredible. This is groundbreaking. I wonder if anybody's ever figured this out before. I thought maybe I was onto something. I've learned since that other people have had that same experience with night vision versus, naked eye. You can't see it.
Yeah.
But at the time, I'd never even heard of that. Because remember, I wasn't even doing a show at this time. So I was just a casual observer of all this. So I'm like, oh my God, they can see me. I can see them. And they're sitting there, just sitting there. And I'm like, well, what are they doing? Why are they just sitting there? And then it occurred to me, like, I'm about the only thing going on in this whole valley.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting here looking at them. Well, chances are they're up there floating, looking at me. And I'm like, oh my God. So I'm like, okay, I'm good. I've seen it. This is as much of the experience as I need right now. I don't need to be probed or anything. I'm good. So turn off the binoculars and hurried inside, locked all the doors, made sure all the blinds were shut, and paced for hours. Oh my God. And I was constantly looking out the blinds to make sure the ship hadn't landed or something, because that was good. I'd seen this. So, I mean, it was very real. For those of you out there that might be skeptical, I put this on the life of my children, that this is a true and real event, exactly as it happened. And I was awake for hours, just processing this incredible event. And up until that point, I believed, but now I'd seen. Now I'd moved from belief into knowing. Right. I knew it was real. I saw it. It was there, and I couldn't refute that logically. It was just part of my life now. And finally, after hours and no mothership landing or any strange light, no missing time, I just finally went, I got to get some sleep. I mean, there's nothing I can do. So I did finally just maybe collapse because I was so exhausted by that time with all this adrenaline. But I slept, and that was the end of the experience. But it was so incredible because, I mean, they could be anywhere. If you're not looking with the right tool, you wouldn't see them.
Yeah, we've got ATN night vision binoculars, and the first time I looked through them, I was just blown away.
Right?
And yeah, and we've got the new kind, and we've got the old kind. I like the old kind. The new kind isn't as good.
Yeah, I found that too.
Right now, the IR is not as good as the older model.
Yeah, generation one is, in my opinion, generation one is superior for that, and maybe just for that application. But I saw it. I mean, it was real.
Orbs in the backyard just because of the ATN binoculars, and I did see a portal one time, and it was square, and it was moving along the tree lines. And once again, I wouldn't have seen it either, except for the night vision binoculars. And that's when I tried to record it, and it fried out our binoculars totally. We couldn't even turn them back on. The company couldn't fix them, and they sent us a new one. So,
Wow.
so I
That's
definitely
crazy.
saw something that night. Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what, when after this experience, when I got back home to Minnesota where I was living, which I finally did relocate out here after another year or two, but I went right on Amazon and ordered those binoculars, and I've been looking at the sky every once in a while. I don't do it as religiously as I should because this area that I'm in is kind of a hot spot for UFO stuff. And granted, I looked my whole life, never saw anything. Now I might have had things go right over my head and didn't know it, but I've talked to so many people in this area that have had a lot of experiences like that. So it's
It
pretty
sounds
common.
like it's all over. It's just like everyone is seeing sightings now.
Yes, yeah, it does. And I think more people are looking now
Mm-hmm.
because maybe because of the soft disclosure. Like
Right.
now maybe people are like, well, maybe I will sit out there and look a little longer instead of just sitting out and looking at my phone in the night air or something. You know what I mean? Like more people are paying attention.
Yeah, that's why
Mhm.
we started this channel. Actually, that's why we called it Midwest Night Watchers, because we were looking up at the sky all the time, and we had the binoculars and the night vision. We started seeing stuff like we're like everybody else. We downloaded apps, to try to track the satellites and Starlink
Oh,
and
sure.
all that stuff. And
Mhm.
it's like, well, I don't see this on the apps. I don't not that it wasn't a government
Oh,
secret
sure.
thing, or they're not telling us about it,
Right.
but that's why we started uploading these videos, just to keep them up there for family, friends, and
Mhm.
then our community started growing just a little bit here and there, and it's taken off pretty good.
Yep.
And so we're sharing out our UFO videos, or what we're saying is
Good.
unidentified stuff,
Yeah.
not necessarily alien spaceships. We're not really sure
Yeah,
what,
I got
what
the
it
videos.
is.
Yeah, I got the videos of the ATM binoculars of orbs. And then we also have a psionics camera that I upload videos of crazy movement up there,
Oh,
with
wow.
the psionics camera.
Yep. Psionics is real nice. Nice. Yeah. Have you ever seen the little dots that are way up there that kind of do crisscrossing patterns up there?
Oh yeah.
Yes.
I
I'm
see
seeing
those all the time, and
flashes.
I don't. I'm
Yeah.
like, well, that can't be satellites. They can't be routing them right
Right.
past each other like that. What the hell is that? And they're like identical. They're like,
Yeah.
I don't know if they're spheres or what the actual shape is, but they're very dim light. They're almost not
Mhm.
even perceptible in the night vision, but you can see them and you can track them and see where they're going. I now after I moved here again, I was out one day. I have a video that I've used on my YouTube show of a really bizarre light, a very bright light, much brighter than the stars through the Generation 1 night vision going by. The only thing I regret about that purchase was that there's no recording element on it. And so what I did was I took a knockoff of a GoPro, like it's a, I don't know, Polaroid or something, and I wired it to sit in one of the eyepieces. So like
cool. Yeah.
looking through one, trying to aim it, but I caught one going by the house. But another time that I wasn't recording, I saw the underside of one go over, and it was maybe it's hard to judge distances for me because I have no. I'm not a pilot or anything. I'm not usually off the surface of the earth, so I'm not real good at how far up things are or how big it is. But it was like watching a pie go overhead with lights on it, and and
wow.
underneath I could see the segments, of that pie as it went overhead. So maybe they're keeping tabs on me. I don't know.
Well, never know. Could be.
Yeah, they might be. You'll start seeing black helicopters.
Well, this is years ago too. I honestly have been more geared towards paranormal investigating now with the ghosts and stuff, and yeah, that's in fact, as I was telling you guys before the show, I'm really working on about 3.5 hours of sleep because last night I was at the haunted Montvale Hotel in Spokane, Washington, doing a ghost investigation, and it was fantastic. A lot of stuff popping off. So
Well, let's get into the ghosts.
okay, let's get into it.
Yeah, let's get in the ghosts.
Yeah.
So what kind of do you use equipment?
Yes,
Or
I do.
some people do, some people don't. Some people like to use their own body as their equipment.
Yeah, I
Some
don't
people
know.
do use EMFs and all the equipment.
Yeah, I use all the equipment because
Okay.
I believe everybody is sensitive and can probably pick up on that stuff too, but I'm not super sensitive in that way. Like I can feel every little vibration. So I just kind of rely on the equipment. So like a REM pod and a little digital recorder, the portal build from Steve Huff, not the purchased one, but the schematics he released that a friend of mine built. and I guess the FLIR that I got that attaches to my tablet, and I don't know. Yeah, I got a night vision camera and stuff, but we had some really crazy. I even bought like little cat balls, those little. That's a
Right.
new thing. Those things
I
are
know.
really great.
Yeah, I
I've had
heard
some.
that. We need to get some. Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. But as I said, I do some of that here in the studio on the live shows, and have had some incredible stuff going on because this house seems to have some presences in it. So sometimes they show up and take part in the shows. So it's pretty cool. But yeah, I definitely rely on the equipment because I guess maybe it's an issue of trust or not really having my own abilities dialed in real sharp for that kind of stuff. But I'm not like an incredibly well-versed investigator, but it's something I love doing. And, I've been in a couple of haunted hotel investigations now, a haunted bar, ghost town in Montana. And all of them were just excellent, just incredible. I seem to get activity around me, which is good because, I guess if you're going to do this, except the haunted bar was weird. It was really weird. And I'll tell you the story about that. It was very strange. So I was setting up, and at this time I didn't even have a real camera. So I've got this, I usually, use cell phone quite a bit. And I just got a camera with the night vision and all of that stuff and took the plunge because I figured if I'm going to really do this, I got to actually invest in it and to create
Right.
the best shows that I can, because the idea is I'm going to release them as videos. But at the bar, this bar has a long history. Apparently there was a murder there of when it was a brothel, and there was seems like a lot of those stories around too. And tragically, I don't doubt that they're true, because I know that women that were made to work in that line of work were not treated well. So it doesn't surprise me if a lot of places have the old murdered prostitutes problem, because yeah, it's horribly sad and tragic. But also the old owner of the bar had a residence upstairs, and he died there and is known to inhabit there. And there's also a ghost in the women's bathroom that pushes women, pulls their hair, all kinds of stuff, a lot of reports. And I talked to people when I was there that, had the experiences, and they're no joke about it. They're all in and saying, yeah, this place is haunted. So the way it went that night, and with the paranormal, with the ghost stuff, it's never on a schedule. It just happens when it happens. It's not like, when you watch the TV shows or a lot of YouTube channels, it's like wherever they go, doors are slamming, things are flying. And it's like, oh, that's just not real life, because, if it was, nobody could ignore it. They would have to research it if it really happened like these channels make it look, because there's these incredible events happening all over the place, almost on command. So, you got to take those with a pinch of salt. But I've always been adamant that whatever I put out there is going to be as it happened. And sometimes it's just nothing happened. But in this case, I was doing an intro in this haunted bar, and I was telling them I had my phone out of the case and in a selfie stick. And I was real careful about how you set it up, because I didn't want the volume getting up and down and, screwing up and stuff. So I set it up very carefully and had done about a 10-minute, monologue about the hotel, about the bar and its history and stuff. And I was like, okay, well, I'm going to be all done. And so I reached up and turned it off and stopped the stream. And I was standing there talking to my co-investigator that night, Charles, a good friend of mine, Charles Howard Johnson. And I was standing there, and he's setting up cameras, static cameras and stuff that we're going to record with. And suddenly my phone starts, and I've been holding it for minutes and nothing's going on. And I'm holding the selfie stick. I'm not holding the phone itself, but it wasn't bumping anything. And suddenly it goes, I'm like, what the hell is that? And I look at my phone, and it said emergency 911 call activated. I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, I wanted to hang up. I grabbed it out of the selfie stick. And I wanted to hang it up, and I'm like, oh no, don't hang up, because then they'll think it's really bad. Right. So I'm like, I got to talk to them, but how am I going to explain this? So I'm like, I held the phone instantly. 911 emergency. What's the nature of your call? And I'm like, ma'am, I said, this is going to be really hard to believe. I'm really sorry. I didn't even know my phone could do this. I don't know what the hell just happened, but my phone just dialed you. I don't know why. She's like, what do you mean? And I'm like, I said, I was just using my phone, and I was done using it, and suddenly it started making this alarm sound, and it called you. I said, I have no idea what's going on. There's no emergency. And she's like, so there's nothing going on? I said, no. I said, everything is fine. And I'm so sorry to bother you. And and then she started saying something else. And then my phone hung up by itself. And I'm like, oh God.
Oh, wow.
Oh no. So I'm like thinking SWAT's going to be rolling up. But I guess she believed me because nobody ever came to check. And I was kind of on the fringe of cell service. So it's possible they were out looking, but couldn't figure out exactly where I was, because where I'm at, GPS in some places doesn't even work. And I think I was in one of those areas that was real like, well, I got this 911 hang up from somewhere here, So, but they never found us. But I'm like, oh my God. Now this is at the very beginning of the night. So, oh my God, this is going to be a hell of a night. Jeez, what have I gotten myself into? The rest of the night was flatlined. Nothing else happened.
Really?
Wow.
Yeah. It was like all of that huge event and then to nothing. So,
Oh man.
I don't know.
Wow.
Yeah, but very, very interesting. So, I mean, sometimes you go out there and nothing happens, but I love doing it because this is, I mean, if you think of the ramifications of how profound this is, that these are potentially, not all of them. I don't believe all of the spirits that we experience are or were human, but it's the possibility of talking to a voice from the past, talking to someone whose experience was so bizarrely and incredibly different. And like, what do you guys see? What do you think? What, I mean, what is it? Do you know you're dead? And having this opportunity to potentially talk and exchange ideas. I wish the technology was at such a point where you could just like go someplace and hit a button and then you're talking to them. Like some psychics claim to be able to do that. And I'm just so jealous of that, because what could you learn? I mean, what could they tell you about their experience? I mean, could you
Right.
imagine? They could say, when you die, it's just like, like falling asleep, like the Harry Potter line. And it'd be like, wow, okay, well, that doesn't sound so horrible. Go ahead.
I've been saying that lately, that, with all this technology, we got the VR, from Apple and Google and the Google glasses. I wish they would do a technology that we can actually see more of our wavelength, and our spectrum, and hopefully, catch the residual of other timelines or past events in our history. That'd be so cool. And then if you could somehow get the audio to go along with it, that would be so interesting.
Wouldn't that be amazing? Yeah. And there's legendary stories. Apparently there's a legend of a device that sits in the Vatican archives where you can actually like dial in the past and look and see what was going on. I don't know. I don't know where that report came from or what kind of credibility it has. I'm sure the Vatican basement's full of all kinds of incredible things and pieces out of our history, but I'm not so sure that it's that, but I'm not saying it couldn't be. I don't know. But, I just think it's such an amazing opportunity to, and even if it's a non-human, if you could talk and see, what is your experience? Why are you upset? Is there something going on? Is there something that we can do to help rectify that? And then you think of stuck spirits, people that don't really know what the hell happened. They just suddenly, nobody's noticing them and they're wandering around, probably slowly going insane. But, if you can help them to find their way home, I don't know. It's just, to me, it just seems like a profoundly noble thing to do, because I think if we can sort out communication, how much could we learn, and how much could it help us to understand the true reality of what's going on around us, because apparently they can move things without bodies. And that's pretty freaking cool. So I'd love to be able to sit on my couch and just dial up a beer, just like, a beer. That would be incredible.
That would just be so interesting, be able to almost do an interview, why are you here? How did this happen? What were you going through when this happened? And why did you cross over? Is there a crossover? And it'd just be so amazing.
Yeah, I think it would be incredible. And so that's another reason I use the devices, is because I personally can't, that I know of, talk to them that way. So, but what I can do is set up devices that they can trigger. And so you can get this yes and no interchange. It's like, are you male last night? Nothing. Are you a female? It was like, wow, and then one time during the investigation, I had the cat ball set up in the REM pod and on the bed in the room, because it's the most haunted room in the hotel that we were in. And I'm like, if you know, and they all the devices had gone off at various times, but then there was a real dead spot. And I'm like, could you just make this ball light up? I said, really? I've seen you that you did it before, and if you're the same spirit, maybe you're not, but all you have to do is just touch it. And then it goes through this period of flashing, you know, because it's meant to make the cats, excited to attack it. But then it stops. And as soon as it stopped, boom, went off again. And I
Wow.
was like, oh, that's cool. And then one of the flashlight tests, you know, went off all by itself. And, you know, it was just, there was several devices that were triggered over. I mean, it started happening so fast. We got done doing some discussions with different people. The other team I was, my friend Charles is part of another team and part of a podcast called the Boo Crew Case Files. And they had brought in a psychic kind of blindly to see what she read. And she is the one that said, you know, there's a slain prostitute. Her name starts with an S. Had a child and is constantly looking for her child, that kind of thing. But she was, you know, taken out by an angry customer or something through a choking or whatever and stuff. And so when it went off on the bed, it was like, are you male? No, nothing happened. Are you female? It's just going crazy. And then does your name start with an S? You know, so it's like, wow, it was really neat to have that corroboration.
Yeah.
Of what she was reading and what had happened. And it was just a really neat location, but it happened so quick. Like I've started to say, I'm sorry, I'm fragmenting because I get really excited, but I just set up the equipment and was just getting ready to set up the cameras, and all of a sudden, it's still going off. Like, you know, so both Charles grabbed his phone, he's recording, I'm grabbing my camera and recording. And it was just really intense. And it went on really steady until about, you know, on and off. There were like waves of activity, and then it would ebb, and then waves of activity, and then it would ebb. But it was always the devices. Nothing moved, nothing slammed, no apparitions. So, I mean, for whatever reason, but we were able to use the devices to get some information, but I don't know, maybe it's really hard for them to interact over a period of time that assertively. Like maybe they can't, and they kind of drift back and then re-energize and come back. And I don't know, you know, again, just spitballing ideas because we just don't know.
Right. They say it takes a lot of energy, you know, to move something in the physical plane compared to, you know, if you're in the spiritual plane or whatever dimension you're in.
Mhm.
And then so it does exhaust them. I mean, just like mediums and psychics talk about how when they try to channel the other side, this drains them physically,
Sure.
you know, and they have to have a period of rest after doing a channeling session or whatever.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Do
Very
you
true.
have better luck with REM pods than the EMF meters, or do you think both of them work just as well?
Well, I think they both work just fine. The REM pod is just harder to ignore because it screams at you. It flashes lights and screams like, whoa, you can't miss it. Like a K2 meter, it'll just flash, and if you're not looking at it, you're not going to know. It gives you no other
Right.
indication.
Mhm.
Some of them do. So there's some that are out there that have the red light and make a little whining sound if they're triggered, but the one I have doesn't. So I mean, they all serve their purpose. But the other good part about it is that using multiple tools like that reinforces the activity, because if it's just one, well, it's how come it didn't trigger anything else? But when you can get other things to trigger as well, it does show an intelligence, and it does reinforce the phenomena. You know, when you can show on various separate instruments that things are being triggered, it does show that something's there doing it. I can't explain it, but I wish I could. I wish I knew exactly what was going on, but it's just fascinating the hell out of me.
Right.
So do you have any spirit boxes or ghost boxes? Have you ever experimented with them?
Yeah, we used those last night as well. The thing, I'll tell you what, I'm not a big fan of the spirit box at all, because you're in a situation where you have to pay attention to the environment around you as well, because they may not want to trigger what you've got out. Maybe they want to do something else. But if you got, you know, in your ear, that's all you're hearing with, you know, the stations coming in and out. And I think the actual, and I'm probably going to offend somebody out there, and I'm sorry, this is my own preference, but I think the actual real responses are real hard to weed out from just all the garbage out there, because you can hear something in anything. You remember those videos that were going around showing like the football games in Europe where people are doing this chant. You can't quite hear what they're saying, but they're all chanting in unison. And then they put the things up on the screen.
Right.
And
And you hear
they're
it.
absolutely different sentences, nothing like each other. They wouldn't sound like each other, but when you're reading one, that's exactly what you're hearing. When you read the next one, you'd swear that's what they're chanting. And it goes on down the line. And it's like, well, there's a filter that has to, activate. And when you're reading something and hearing a cadence, you put it to it, whether it's there or not. And I think there's a potential for a lot of false positives with things like SB7. Now, I've heard great captures through SB7s, don't get me wrong, but the other part of it is, again, is you're out of the entire other experience. You've got all you can hear is that, and you can't hear if something starts knocking behind you, if there's a sliding noise behind you, something's moving, because all you've got is that static noise. So I think it takes you so far out of the experience and out of your other senses that to me, it does more harm than good, but that's my own take.
Well, I agree to that. We've got the SB7, the new one, and that I always do it on reverse. So if you're hearing a word, it's less likely to hear that word, because I always scan in reverse.
Yeah.
But I understand. I'd rather use something, that's kind of quiet so you can kind of pay attention and listen.
Right.
We've got the Ovilus also. I really enjoy using the Ovilus.
Yeah, Ovilus is cool.
It will spit out words. It's not like an app that just has a random dictionary that's going to spit out random words.
Right. The curious thing about, and I'm not trying to debunk that in any way, but the curious thing to me, and I've said it on my show many times, and tell me what you think, because I don't have a whole lot of experience. I've used Ovilus with Charles before, and there's been some good. I've used other word generators. The curious part to me is how do they know? It says the idea is use your energy to say stuff. Well,
right.
Where's that learning curve for that? I mean, can you just show up at an old abandoned asylum and suddenly all of the inhabitants can make words happen by, energy inflections? So how did they learn? And maybe they're tapped into a knowledge pool that we can't understand just because they're energetic, and maybe that's easy. But it always seems weird to me. It's like, how can you pull out a device in an abandoned ghost mine, for instance, where nobody there would even have any idea what the hell you've got, but suddenly they can tell you, these words. And it is curious to me. And I've been playing around with several apps, like phone apps lately, and I've had some great results, but I've also had a lot of garbage results. And so I think, again, it's multiple modalities I think are important, because if you just zero in on one thing, it's really hard to corroborate, because there's just such a possibility of misconstruing it or false positives, but when you've got 2 or 3 devices interacting, showing a presence, then it's like, well, how do you ignore all of that? So I'm really a proponent of reinforcing, other methods in the same area, just to see if you're getting multiple hits, because it wouldn't make sense that all of those things or a couple of those things would go off if there wasn't something intelligently making it happen.
Yeah, because I've been playing around with some apps that I normally don't. I mean, these you have to pay for. And I kind of went, well, I hear so many people say good about it. I'm going to give it a try. Like you said, sometimes it says things like, yeah, right. But then other times it's right on. Like I go inside and I heard it say inside. And then a little later I go outside and it said outside. And then I was coughing and I had a little tickle and it said choking. So yeah, it was spot on.
Yeah, that's
other
cool.
times it's just like, I like you. And I'm going, okay. Just random words.
Yeah, what are you, Furby?
Yeah. I've been using this one. I guess I can show it on the camera. I won't turn it on right now, but I've been experimenting with this one for a while, and it's called Spirit Talker.
Yep.
And it looks like this.
Yep.
So what I've found, and I think this is really profound too, because it kind of empowers us as part of the process. But I think the app in and of itself may be more random, but I think after a period of time, you start to get more and more relevant responses. So there's something about using an app over a period of time. Maybe our intention is helping it to work. Maybe it's helping to make the connection to these other voices. But I mean, it also still spits out garbage like Find My Body. It's
Mhm.
like, was it my turn to look for it? What's going on?
Yeah.
Where'd you lose it? Where should I start?
That's the app that I was talking about.
Yeah,
Yes.
what's
So,
the other one?
so
Music
and
Box?
the other one is called Spirit Music Box, and
Yeah.
it will go off and it will show you EMF, music spirit. Yeah. So those are the two that I paid for and that
Yep.
I've been playing with the last couple of weeks, and I like them so far.
Yeah, I've noticed that the longer that I use them, there is something to that. Something about,
Mhm.
and now it's funny because Charles has done a lot of, the guy that I researched with, Charles Howard Johnson, that I mentioned. He's researched a lot of ITC, instrumental transcommunication. This is kind of the umbrella that all of this stuff falls into, using tools to communicate. But he did some research, and apparently the father of it all, who kind of started the EVP stuff, and he told me a story. I'll just tell you because it was new to me, and I was like, oh wow. But he
Yeah.
was out recording sounds apparently of birds, and when he got home and was listening to his recording, he heard his mother talking to him, and she'd been dead. And he was like, whoa. So he kind of fell into it. And he also apparently invented the idea of like having a video camera pointed at a television, and a television screen that would show the image of what it was seeing. So you basically have this infinite loop of images stacking, and people have gone frame by frame through those, segments. And if you're shooting at 30 frames a second for 10 minutes, you've got thousands and thousands of frames to crawl through. But they found some incredible anomalies, of like looking like figures. And so is it creating a sneak peek through dimensions or something? I don't know, but it's an anomaly. But he was saying that apparently in an interview that he read from this gentleman, he said, whatever you're using, keep using it, because there seems to be that event where the more you use it, the more accurate it becomes. So that's kind of metaphysical to me. Like there's a metaphysical element to this. We often think of computers as this like totally separate thing from us, but somehow we're a part of the process. And so by virtue of using it, focusing our intent on it, our energy, maybe it becomes more and more reliable as a form of communication.
Yeah, because we get that a lot where some people say, the SB7 is just one of the wonderful things, and somebody else picks it up and says, I don't get nothing off this thing. I get something off of the one over there. So maybe they are more tuned, like picking up your favorite crystal or your lucky baseball glove or whatever you're attuned to or associated with. I mean, I don't know.
Now, have you ever been in a haunted building that, sure you've got equipment, but have you had certain lights that are in the room blink on and off, and they would be separate lights, like this one goes on and off, that one goes on and off. You ask it questions and say, okay, this light, make that one blink. And it works kind of like a REM pod. Have you ever experienced anything like that?
I've never done I've never gotten successful, on command kind of things, but
Okay.
I've experienced, I've lived in several haunted houses where lights and things would go off, doors would shut, occasionally saw full apparitions and stuff. But yeah, I mean, I've certainly seen light anomalies. One of the things that happened, and I think this is kind of a longer story. How much time do we got? Okay. Well, so I lived here. My wife and young child all live here now. I have two older children that are adults, but we're living here, and we'd been here and we had a lot of weird stuff happening. Now, I'd been in many haunted houses, as I said. So for me, it was kind of just Tuesday or whatever, it's like, oh, there's something here. Okay. Trying to make itself known. It didn't feel horrible. It didn't feel negative or anything. Some creepy stuff would happen. And I was like, oh, what's going on? Well, one of the things that was really creepy and kind of pissed me off too was, I rent this house. I don't own it. So I had this outlet, and there's this one outlet in the kitchen would ooze this red crap, and it was like red syrup. It wasn't blood. I mean, it didn't look like blood. It just looked like a red syrup coming out of my wall. I'm like, what the hell is that? Constantly clean it out. I take out the screws on the faceplate, look in there, and there's nothing in there. And I kept, what is this garbage? But also, I could not get that outlet to work to save my life. It would not work. So I had one of the maintenance guys over here, and I'm like, hey, by the way, can you look at this outlet? He goes, what's wrong? I was like, it just doesn't work. It won't work. The dude plugs in a voltage tester and it lights right up. He's like, there's nothing wrong with this outlet.
Oh my gosh.
Oh,
I'm like,
wow.
oh, you dick, you made me look stupid. You know, so
Oh.
I think sometimes it's like, you know, mocking me. And another time the light bulb in my bathroom went out, and it's up in a fixture, but it's one of those curly fluorescent things that basically last until Jesus comes back. I'm not sure, but
Yeah.
it went out, and I was like, God, you know, so I went to the store and got a replacement. I got up my ladder, put the new one in, on off, wouldn't go on. God. So when the guy was there, I was like, hey, can you look at that light in there? Hits the switch, it goes on. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
yeah. I was things like that were happening here, and I was like, what's going on in this house? What is going on? And I'd have my TV turn on by itself and go through channels and stuff. It was just a lot of activity, and sometimes things would like cupboard doors would shut. And I was like, well, something's here. And it didn't, again, it never really creeped me out. I don't know what's wrong with me. It should have, but it didn't. I just don't ever get that emotional about it for some reason. But I was doing a show one time years ago, and the neighbor, her daughter is an adult living in Portland, who's a practicing witch and a wonderful person. She's like, hey, you know, I asked her, I said, hey, do you want to come on the show and just talk about this? Because I think a lot of people don't understand this, and maybe you can help us understand what this is. She's like, oh yeah, sure. So she came on, and she's sitting in the chair over there that's just to my right. And she's like, so have you ever had weird stuff happen in here? I'm like, oh my God, yeah, I've had weird stuff happen in here. And she grew up next door. And I'm like, yeah, oh God, have I? I started telling her. She goes, well, you know what happened here, right? I'm like, no. and it's really, really, really sad and tragic. But what had happened was she had it wasn't a classmate, it was a kid that was in a grade near her, but he had his bedroom upstairs. And he I guess went into a deep depression and ended up taking his own life in this house. And it was like a real transition for me. Of course, I felt this great swell of sadness and agony. If anybody with empathy hears a story like that and it's like, oh, you know, it breaks your heart, because it's hard to reconcile that depth of pain. That's where you think the only answer is, and it's a heartbreaker. But it also changed the energy of the place. And while things still happen here, it's not so mischievous now. And I would talk to this person. I looked, I couldn't find any death certificates or anything, but I've looked a couple times. I'm sure if I dug deep enough, I would find it, but because I always wanted to have a name, it would be nice to be able to give this young man a name. But I talked to him like, you know, I'm so sorry. This was your experience. I'm so sorry. This is how deep and profound your pain was. But you know, I hope you know that if you're here in peace and love and willing to live in harmony with us, you're welcome to stay. This is still your home. However, if you're going to screw with us, if you're going to cause problems, you got to get out, and I will get you out. And after that, it was really peaceful. You know, it wasn't unpeaceful before, but it was just so damn mischievous. It was like, oh, you know,
Right.
just so, but it did change. It changed everything. And maybe it was just me that changed, but at least having the understanding of what, and that's why I think when you paranormal investigate, it's so important to do the background. You got to know, what does the history say? Because one of my pet peeves, just spider webbing again, is when people go into investigations and like, is Phil here? Phil, are you here? Are you here? Well, how the hell do you know Phil's still there? It might be Becky or Steve or someone,
Right.
and you're not talking to them. You know, you're going in there with a, this is who we're talking to Elvis. Where's Elvis? He's supposed to be here. It's like, well, you know, the 15 other ones are just sitting there going, well, geez, guess we're not important.
Or you have one say, yeah, I'm Phil.
Exactly.
It might be John, who knows?
Right. But it's like, you can't go into it. So it's good. I mean, it's good to have a historical reference, and it certainly made sense in this case. But, I think that's also when people investigate, go in with an open mind, because what you're expecting to be there might not be what's there, and who's there might be someone else. So you got to have an open mind to it.
Right.
Going in and naming a ghost and calling that entity, it might be absolutely counterproductive, because that, if it's there, it might not be active that night, or might not even be there. We don't know. But the other ones that are just don't feel like you're talking to them. So
have you ever had an experience that literally just scared you that you screamed and really jumped and you weren't expecting something?
No, and that's
No?
I'll tell you what, I lived in one of the homes that I owned years ago was a 1894 Victorian home, a Queen Anne home back in Red Wing,
Oh, wow.
Minnesota, and it was a beautiful home. But there was and with this home there was activity, but it was kind of on and off throughout the year. It was never consistently active or consistently dormant. It was just sometimes of the year it would just really spike and peak, and other times it was more benign. But one time it was, well, this house had a lot of things happening. Like I had one of those kitchen doors that went both ways, you know, that boom, boom, boom.
Right.
And it would always hang up on the carpeting. And because they had at some point I found the actual door down in the basement covered in junk. And I took it out and cleaned it up and, you know, Murphy oil soaped it. And it was beautiful. It was just this beautiful ornate door with a window in it and stuff. And so I brought it up and hung it up. And well, in the meantime, since that door was there, they had installed shag carpeting in the dining room. Of all the places where you want shag carpeting, why not your dining room? It's like, what are you, stupid? But anyway, they put it in there, and that door would just hang up on there, and you could still use it, but it was really easy to go into the kitchen, not so much coming out because it would hang up on the carpet. You have to use a pretty significant amount of force to shut it. But my ex-wife at the time was there. She was studying. She was going to college, taking college classes in accounting. She was studying, and she also had this tubular cheap brass furniture in the dining room, like that really, you know, those really $50 sets that you used to be able to pick up at, you know, wherever Kmart. And she had that, and every time you sit in it, squeak and squeak. And so she'd be there alone, no pets or anything, before we ever had any children. Those chairs would start squeaking like someone was sitting in them.
Oh.
And she would get terrified. She would get absolutely terrified. And then she would be sitting there as well in the nights studying while I used to work nights. And the door, which was hung up on the carpet, would go boom, 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 like that. And so she had a lot of things happen. I had a lot of things happen in the house. But one time, so we divorced, and she took the dining room set, which she was welcome to. I didn't want it. And I was, you know, living alone there as a, you know, the weekend dad. We had a son by that time, by the time we finally separated. But I happened to be alone that day, and I was walking through my house, and I walked out of the kitchen. I was just going somewhere. I had to go somewhere, and where I don't remember, but I walked through the dining room right under there was no table there anymore. So I'm walking right under the chandelier, and I walk through, and I get to the door to go out to the porch and outside. And I grabbed the door handle, and something just made me stop and say, you know, you gotta look. So I had my hand on the door handle, and I turned and looked back to the dining room. And as I did, the chandelier, which was in the ceiling, in this plaster ceiling, pulled out of the ceiling and smashed to the floor.
Oh
Now
my.
I'm saying the screws pulled, the plaster came down. It was like something went boom like that. Now that should have terrified me, and I honest to God think something's wrong with me. I'm not even really tongue in cheek. But the only thing I thought after that was like, oh damn it, now I gotta fix that. And then I just stormed out. I was so mad because it was like, you know, I was just going through all this other mess, and now I got to fix a chandelier somehow and a ceiling. So that's probably one of the most profound paranormal events that I can think of right offhand. I've had so many, and it kind of pains me because I probably should have written them down through the years, because all of this stuff is amazing.
Right.
But that one I really remember because it was such a punctuating moment. And I was kind of beside myself, like, why didn't that freak me out? And maybe it's just because it wasn't meant to. It was just meant to show me. I don't know. I just try to understand it, because I think when you're in the presence of evil, you know you're in the presence of evil.
Yeah,
Like,
you feel it.
right. It just permeates you like, oh God, something horrible here. And I've been places where I felt like, yeah, this is not a good place. This is not a good
Same
place
here.
at all. But it wasn't fear. It was more like, nope, this is not a good energy. I don't want to be a part of this. And so, yeah, I've seen incredibly profound things happen, but largely my reaction, and thank God, I'm not saying I can't be scared, but thank God that I haven't been. So.
That's awesome.
So what would you rather do? I mean, I hear other people say this. Some people are just in the ghosts. They weren't in the cryptids. Then they start getting in the cryptids. Same with the cryptids. They'd rather do cryptids. They said, hell no, am I going to investigate ghosts? That some of them do both. Now, how do you, you kind of investigate all of it, don't you?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've done a little bit of Bigfoot investigating, but not much. So being that I'm fat and old, Bigfoot investigating is a lot harder. You know, I mean,
We
I'm
hear
just,
ya.
it requires a physical commitment that I can't give it, unless it's in a campground somewhere nice, with a pool. Then I'm great. I'll go investigate. But, I love ghost investigating because it's not, usually not physically intensive. It's really pretty relaxed. You don't have to go anywhere. You can just,
Yeah.
hopefully they'll show up. But UFO investigating, I've never been called to investigate it. I've only had my own experiences, but I guess I'm interested in all of it equally. But I'm just physically, I'm aware of my own limitations enough to know that I'm probably not going to be hiking into the deep woods, on a 4-day backpack trip into no man's land, sleeping on a tent on the rocks of the earth. That window closed about 20 years ago for me, I think. So I'll armchair research that. I mean, I have, as I said, done it. There was one just last year up in the Colville Reservation in Washington State, and I went along on that. And I didn't plan on staying overnight. It was kind of a stupid story. I went along as part of it because they were doing a documentary, and they're like, "Oh, why don't you stay? Why don't you stay?" I'm like, "Oh, okay, it's a nice warm day." Well, I knew it'd get cold in the night, but I didn't realize when you're up in the mountains how much colder. So I'm dressed in my khaki shorts and a t-shirt, and I've got my car. So I'm like, okay, well, I'll just sleep in my car. It'll be fine. And I went to sleep, and I woke up at about 2:30 in the morning, absolutely freezing. And I reached around my car and I found a pair of sweatpants, and I'm trying desperately to make that into a blanket somehow. And it's a long, miserable night. And I'm thinking, God, I could just start it up and warm up. And I'm like, no, that's kind of defeating the purpose sitting here in my idling car up in the mountains with this crew of other people. And I'm going to be sitting there idling, listening to the radio. It's like, oh, it was miserable. So, yeah, not my best plan. Now I would bring a blanket at least. God, I'll tell you what though, the one thing that kept up, I slept like crap too, by the way. But the one thing I kept thinking is like, God, what if I wake up and there's a big face pressed up against the window? Are they gonna be like scraping my carcass out of the driver's seat as I stroke out? I don't know how you deal with that. Oh, it's one thing, because I'll tell you, the truth is I'm absolutely fascinated about cryptids, but I don't know that I'd ever want to see one up close, having had the experience of something huge growling at me behind me. I don't know that I want to see what that looks like looking at me, doing it. It's hard to conceptualize what 8 feet of, muscle that could, pound you into pudding in a second, what that would look like. And it's not happy to see you.
Right.
It's like, oh
Yeah.
I don't think there can be many more profound fears than that. So,
And how big was it that made you feel on the inside of the shaking and the rattling? That's
Yeah.
pretty powerful lungs of a growl.
right. And then it was a long growl too. It was like 15 seconds. It felt like
Oh,
forever.
wow.
And I was just frozen in
Wow.
in fear, not being zapped. I wasn't zapped because we ran just fine after that when we finally made that decision. But yeah, it was so terrifying. Yeah.
I bet.
Yeah. So I can get scared like that.
I
I'm
think
not
we all
trying
can.
yeah. I mean, there's definitely many things that would frighten me. I think a dog man would probably frighten me worse because, whereas a Bigfoot might look at you and growl and maybe throw some sticks or something for the most part, like a dog man will get right up in your grill. They'll go right up to you and just like, I could eat you right now. I really could.
Or rip you apart.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I mean, so in truth, I'm equally interested in all of these aspects, but I'm just, aware of what my limitations are personally and what I can expend my energy on, and what if I do expend my energy on is going to put me in traction. And so that's why I focus on the ghost stuff mostly. But I love talking to people with all of these experiences because, again, I think something absolutely amazing is being demonstrated.
Mhm.
Yeah. So
That's what we want to focus on our show. We love hearing experiences. We want to hear other people's experiences and, get them out there, and I think this whole community, nobody's looking at any of us that we're all crazy, because we're all crazy. Actually, we're crazy together. and nobody's going to judge, and just share your experiences with others.
Yeah, exactly. I do want to make sure to take a moment and say hello to all my listeners. I'm seeing several very familiar names in the chat. So great to see you guys. And I just want to let you all know that I'm very honored to meet those of you that I haven't seen before. Thank you for tuning in and being a part of this as well.
Yeah, we want to apologize. We're having technical problems. We're sorting it out. Normally, I would put everybody saying hello to everybody on the screen and all this, but we've switched tablets, and I don't have the mouse hooked up to this tablet. And it's just been a mess.
Oh no, it's fine.
Hearing us, we're going with that. We don't want to mess with anything else, as long as we can do our show. Everyone's hearing us. We're not breaking up, but we are reading the chat. We do see everyone out there, and thank you everyone for joining us.
So I think this would be a good time to stop, since you're running on E probably about right now. You've probably exhausted you.
You need sleep.
You can go ahead and give out your information again. If you have any guests or special shows coming up or any projects, go ahead and mention that too, if you would.
Any conferences you're going to or anything like that.
Well, I just want you to know that every show is special. So no, I'm just kidding. Absolutely. No, I really love being here. You can find my show at the podcast is available everywhere. It's just iTunes, Spotify, Pandora, Google Play, iHeartRadios, Castbox, Stitcher, you name it. And again, we're starting season 5, so that'll be starting tomorrow. I'll be uploading that later tonight. And you can find our YouTube channel at youtube.com/paranormal portal. And that's where we have probably close to 2,000 live streams that we've done over the years since 2017.
Wow.
They're all there. Yeah. So if you'd like to come check it out again, remember, both these shows are very different. So if you're a fan of the podcast, you might not be a fan of the YouTube. Just because we like to joke around and have a lot more fun there. But if you're a fan of YouTube, you might think the podcast is less interesting. But it's just the whole picture. It's just such a phenomenal passion of mine. And I just feel very, very fortunate to be on this journey, and especially to meet people like you guys. But if you want to learn more about my show, head over to paranormalportal.net. All of the links to all the various social media is available on the top of the screen. And, my P.O. box is on the bottom if you want to send me something nice. I accept nice things.
All right. That's great.
Oh, we've had so much fun talking to you tonight. We just enjoyed it so much.
Yeah, we need to get you back, maybe like next fall after you do some more live investigatings this summer, and we can do another part 2. Yeah.
We're looking at getting St. Ignatius next, the St. Ignatius abandoned hospital in Washington State. A lot of the big ghost shows have been there, so it'll be exciting to get over there and check it out in person. So yeah. I'll be happy to come back. Just let me know. So you crack the door a little bit, I'll find my way in.
All right. That sounds amazing.
We'll be sure to invite you.
Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I really enjoyed this.
Well, thank you guys so much. And it's been an absolute honor and pleasure to be here. And I look forward to hearing from more.
All right. So everybody, it's been great seeing you tonight and listening to you and seeing you in the chat. And we will see you next time. Be sure to catch us on Midwest Night Watchers on YouTube and Facebook, and William Nighthawk on YouTube and Facebook. And we will see you next time.
Bye, everyone.
Love you all.
Take care.